Again, they visibly delight in one another's company.
Alright. Let's see this hippo one. Are hippos OP? Think about it. Think about it real quick while I sip my water.
For this, way too expensive. But today I'm going to show you guys how to get all this stuff for a lot cheaper.
Alright, real quick. Let's think about it. Are hippos OP? My opinion, they destroy any animal. Put them against an elephant, over. Put them against a lion, over. Put them against what's a strong animal? Crocodiles, over. Hippos are OP. Hippos are the best, honestly. Hippos are where it's at. Even like they terrify me, bro. Even if they terrify me. Let's go. Let's watch this. Oh, damn. See? Oh, damn.
This episode is sponsored by Dashlane. Africa, the game's hardcore server. On top of the potentially lethal heat and disease debuffs, many of the most powerful builds in the game are playable only on the Africa server. Everyone knows the big names. Elephants are the biggest, cheetahs are the fastest, cobras are the most venomous, etc. However, one of the builds that frequently gets overlooked is the hippopotamus. Even though none of their stats are the best in a single category, there are things that they do better than anything else. So today I'm going to give an overview of the hippopotamus's stats and abilities, talk about its good and bad matchups, and where I'd rate it in the overall tier list. I've already done one video that sort of touches on all these things, but since it was one of the first videos I ever made, it's pretty lacking in quality. So hopefully this guide will do a better job doing the topic justice. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into it. Hippos are the premier tank build of the African aquatic meta. Their success comes from a combination of phenomenal stats and from speccing into abilities that allow for some pretty ingenious exploitation of the game's water physics, which I'll get into in a bit. But first, their stats. So you probably noticed that the Hippo stats are, in a word, phenomenal. They have one of the highest...
Excuse me? Damn, that's stats though.
...levels of any land build, second only to the elephant. Normally, builds with one unusually high base stat tend to have major shortcomings in other areas, but the Hippo simply doesn't. While its intelligence is only average, all the rest of their stats far outclass most other African builds. They have great damage, high defense, and even have great stealth for a build in such a high weight class. But perhaps the most surprising is their mobility level, which relates to how their abilities let them engage in physics engine exploits like I mentioned earlier. So in addition to having relatively high run speed on land, hippos are also unbelievably mobile in the water. Now, normally when designing...
Hold up.
Hippos are also unbelievably mobile in the water. Now, normally when designing your character to be fast in the water, you spec into traits like, water mobility. Things like a streamlined body, fins, flukes, webbed feet, all these things strictly buff water speed, and usually are the go-to for players trying to take their character to new depths in the aquatic meta. The Hippo player base decided to do exactly none of that, instead dumping most of their evolution points into pure bulk and muscle. As a result, hippos are so dense that, unlike most animals, they do not float. This lets them be one of the only builds that can actually use the run movement option underwater with any success. So yeah, hippos, despite not actually being able to swim, have one of the best aquatic movement options in the game, and they didn't even have to spend any evolution points on aquatic mobility to do so. So hippos have 4 signature abilities, the first being their water dash ability that I just explained.
Think about it. How are you going to be the worst swimmer, but yet the best swimmer at the same time?
Their second ability is their 2-inch thick skin. This ability is the reason behind their high defense level, and it grants them some of the best resistances in the game, particularly to the common threats in the African server. It grants them near total immunity to slash and bite type damage, since claws and teeth simply are too short to pierce their skin. This lets them shrug off the vast majority of standard attacks in the African meta, and is also crucial for letting them survive attacks even from groups of enemies, which is normally the answer to defeating a high HP target. Defending from physical attacks is important, but it's just as critical to make sure your elemental resistances are adequate too, because hippos have specced into the hairless trait in order to minimize mobility debuffs in the water. They're highly vulnerable to solar damage. In order to mitigate this issue, Hippos have spec'd into sweat that grants them UV resistance and, as an added bonus, grants them resistance to infection.
I'm all about quality over quantity, whether it's for my closet.
Get the fuck out of here, Miss Karen. I don't want to buy your. I don't want to buy your skirts. Look how disgusting them skirts are. Out of here.
Another hugely beneficial trait to have when you spend most of your time in unclean water, potentially with open wounds. The only downside is that while active, it gives the hippo players a reddish tint, temporarily lowering their stealth level. Their last special trait is their tusks. Hippos haven't spec'd into carnivory or even omnivory. They're strictly herbivorous and can't gain any XP from meat. However, regardless of this fact, they have one of the most damaging bites in the game. On top of the sheer force of the bite itself, which is around a ton by the way, their tusks deal massive damage to anything they puncture. But on top of the hippo's damage potential, their tusks offer another important benefit: intimidation. So the most effective intimidation techniques are the ones that can be quickly switched on and off. A coral snake's colors are always bright, and a spider is always creepy, but hippos aren't always terrifying. In fact, most of the time they appear non-threatening, yet in an instant they can crank up the intimidation to 100 just by opening their mouths.
Damn.
A hippo player with intimidation active is one of the most intimidating things in the entire game, easily being able to scare off even some of the bulkiest builds like rhinos. Okay, so for matchups, hippos sport one of the most comfortable matchup spreads possible. Because they're highly resistant to bite and slash attacks, most of the relevant predator matchups, such as crocodiles, lions, hyenas, and painted dogs, are highly favorable for the hippo. On top of this, the hippo's own attacks can one-shot any of those predators. As for bad matchups, any builds that focus on stab-type weaponry can definitely give a hippo a hard time. In particular, elephants and rhinos both have long enough horns or tusks to pierce the hippo's thick skin and deal critical damage to a hippo foolish enough to challenge them. Fortunately, the rhino's low intelligence makes it highly susceptible to intimidate abilities, so that matchup is by no means unwinnable. Elephants, though, they'll walk straight through a group of hippo players, knowing none of them will challenge it. Also, ironically, one of the worst matchups for a hippo is another hippo, since a hippo's tusks do have the potential to pierce their defenses. The last important matchup to discuss for them is how they fare against humans, and in this regard, they've got one of the best records of all. Obviously, they still lose to the highly advanced equipment that humans have recently unlocked, but aside from that, humans don't have any way to combat them. As a result, hippos have the highest KD ratio versus humans in the entire game. Even special high-level mounts, like boats and trucks, can be taken down by a hippo. So where do hippos belong on the tier list? Well, considering how they're basically unstoppable tanks that manage to spec into an excellent semi-aquatic playstyle without sacrificing any land-based abilities to do so, it's tough to argue that they're anything but S-tier. They easily control any rivers or lakes that they're in, being even more dominant than crocodiles. In fact, while currently the vast majority of the hippo player base is in the African server, a few of them have recently broken into the South American meta. Now, hippos have one of the lower spawn rates in the game, so it'll be a while before we can really assess their viability in servers outside of Africa, but I would bet that eventually hippos will be one of the most dominant builds in South America too, especially since they have great matchups against the top tiers there too, like the caiman and the jaguar. The piranha player base might give them a hard time though, so we'll have to wait and see. Their thick hide offers a lot of protection, but with hundreds of bites chipping it away, even the hippo might struggle. Protecting your hit points is critical to survival in the current meta, but perhaps equally important is protecting your passwords, and that's where today's sponsor Dashlane comes in. Dashlane is what I personally use to protect my passwords and keep myself safe online, because it literally does everything. It's not just a password manager, it's not just a VPN, it's not just a dark web monitoring
This fool with his ads, oh my god,
everything you could possibly need to keep your internet defense level at its max.
Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Ridiculous. In my opinion, that whole video, he kind of shitted on. He kind of like the way he was talking was shitting on like the hippos. And I didn't like it. I didn't like it one bit. I just it was pretty good. It was alright. Alright. It was alright. But this one right here, look. Hold up, let's see. There's a funny part right here. Look at this. Look at this.
So in addition to having relatively high run speed on land, Hippos are also unbelievably mobile in the water, now exploits like I mentioned earlier. So in addition to having relatively high run speed on land, hippos are also unbelievably mobile in the water.
Dude, this beam,
now, normally when designing your character to
me
be fast in the
this reminds me of like when you're in high school and it'd be like the last week and you have like shit grades, like all your grades are F and you're like, fuck man. You're sitting there like, how the hell am I gonna get my English, math, all of them up? How are you do it? And this is you going to the
surprising is their mobility level, which relates to how their abilities let them engage in physics engine exploits like I mentioned earlier. So in addition to having relatively high run speed,
yeah, 1999, hey, 1999, yeah, 1999. Said we coming from up under, yo, straight up out the bungalow. Got bitches by the bundle, yo, but living in the jungle, though. We coming from up under, yo, straight up out the bungalow. Got bitches by the bundle, yo, but living in the jungle, though. Wait, yeah, bring it back, I seen this shit. This route is so damn seen it, bitch. I'm fucking in Adidas slips. My dick, it tastes like creamies, bitch. I live it, I don't dream it, kids. Believe in what you seeking, and then switch the flow. I know that I could make it if I really tried. I do my best, I know I tried. So why you hating on my grind? I speak with passion when I rhyme. Can't keep up with me, I'ma shine. And I got a good ties with some people that I